Welcome, everybody. Here we are in our community virtual library podcast station. And today we have two guests who were early librarians who helped form the community virtual library and bring librarianship into virtual worlds. So I'm going to start here with Rocky Vallejo and ask you, Rocky, to tell us a little bit about your background and a little bit about how you got involved with the early days of virtual world libraries. Rocky?
Thank you. I was employed by the State Library of Kansas when we got into Second Life, and I still am. As of this year, I've been there 37 years. I work with state government publications and cataloging primarily. Uh, the state librarian back in 2006, Christy Brandow, heard about Second Life and got interested in what it was all about and encouraged all of us to get into it. So that's how we started. And I'll give this over to Diane, Cindy Elkhart, so she can give a bit about her background too.
I worked at the Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library. I am now retired. I was in acquisitions, and when they heard about Second Life at my library, we helped get our library in there and also did the teen program with the teens. But basically, we started, and it was a really neat experience.
I showed up first the day before Cindy Elkhart came in and spent about 2 hours running into trees, unable to open up doors, the usual newbie situation. And the one really cool thing I found out about Second Life was that you could fly. I think I discovered it accidentally and was just going, oh my gosh, whoa. And so then I was able to fly into buildings and fly into trees. But we eventually, Diane came in the next day and we sort of figured out how to get around, and we ran into Abby Zenith, Rhonda Truman. And she listened to us and the fact that we might be interested in volunteering, and so immediately set us up working with a government documents collection in one of the buildings. It was the collection was up on the fourth or fifth floor, so we had a heck of a time trying to figure out how to get up there. But once we did, we started setting things up with basic instructions from Abby Zenith and others, and did the usual thing where we were trying to place a couch and ended up moving it all the way across the sim. But we had small computers that we set up with links to federal and state government document resources. Eventually, we added international documents as well. It was a cool experience, very exciting at the beginning, especially. Just realizing that we could set up a virtual library that would appeal to people all over the world, not just within our own state or within our own nation. From there, we moved on to developing other collections as well, literature, sports. We also worked at the reference desk.
That's wonderful. It's interesting to hear about some of those early days and what it was like to fly, teleport, learn how to use the interface. Were there any stumbling blocks or just big obstacles during those early days that you had to tackle to overcome?
I think getting dressed and undressed, getting clothing, learning how to walk. Sometimes your head of your body, just learning how to do everything, setting out how to build, and not having things go 3 feet away from you or further across a sim or something when you're trying to place it.
As far as building a library collection, we were very fortunate in having a man whose name I cannot remember right now, but he had set up computers. They were virtual little computers, and when you clicked on them, you could set up links to various places on the internet. We eventually got links to talking books, just anything we wanted. It was essentially recreating a library in a whole different place. Very challenging at first, but as we picked up on things, we learned and advanced and were able to teach others. There were huge meetings at first, the first couple years, where everyone would get together. There might be 30 people, 40 people, and of course, we're all chatting. And I was in my 50s then, and just trying to read the chatter as it went down sort of blurred my vision after a while because there was just too much to read. But we were sharing what we learned and what we could do. And by doing that, we were telling or teaching each other how to further develop our collections and services. And Diane just told me Bucky Barkley was the name of the gentleman who created the little computers. He also did several other great things that helped us along too.
I seem to remember some little simulated computers. It's interesting how many different things can be simulated so that you have this sense of it being what it is in a simulated environment. You sometimes have it's like a metaphor, and you utilize these tools that are similar in real life to what is simulated, and that leads me to ask. Were you able to meet some of your colleagues in the physical world and as well as the virtual world, and what was that like?
We met a few of the Kansas librarians locally, and then one year we went to ALA in Chicago and met quite a few people from the United States there.
Yes, I remember that well. I was there. I believe that was it 2010 maybe in Chicago, 2009, somewhere in there, when a lot of
Yeah, right about
librarians.
2009 maybe.
And it was great to see the people. I mean, the fact that Second Life can do a lot for educational purposes and things that other places may not. I mean, people can interact. They don't have any disabilities. They can learn things. We visited one place that had like teaching medical students things that they could see. It was just, it's a really a way of learning without having to go far, far away. You can interact people, as Bill said, all over the world, and without, I think, the expense of having to travel and everything. It's just, I think it's a very neat, valuable experience.
Yes, you've really articulated some of the advantages and benefits that you can have in a virtual environment like this. As you mentioned, you don't have to travel; it's global. How do you see this evolving in the future? Any ideas? Do you think this is going to continue on for years?
Well, at the time when we first started and into those first few years, I can remember visiting places. One of them comes to mind. It was a university where they were teaching nursing students medical procedures who were all scattered all over a particular state. They were doing it virtually so that they could watch on the screen as an avatar perform certain medical procedures and learn how to do them using that. Uh, I'm sure I visited several other places where similar things happen, but that one has always stood out in my mind as a really cool way to teach. And further developing that with technology that we have nowadays would probably be even more advanced and better.
Exactly. So I think you are saying that you were early into something that most likely will continue and will evolve. And you mentioned that really great example for education. But do either of you have any personal examples that are memories of a sim that you helped work on that is really a good memory for you?
Yes, maybe a year, 6 months after we started, we donated money to the libraries and began a children's collection, a children's library, not specifically for people who wanted to be children avatars, but for librarians and teachers and others interested in children's literature. It was named after our daughter Rachel, who died when she was 7, and it was really a wonderful place. We connected with a woman whose avatar name was Julia Haythor, and she had this huge sim, I think multiple sims with gardens and animals, just all sorts of fantastic things. She donated a bunch of that to us, and so we were able to set up Rachelville as sort of a wonderful children's playground for adults to walk through with resources then to various aspects of children's literature. It was a big learning experience for us because neither one of us had a background in children's literature, but we were able to communicate with others who did, who helped us set up the collections. We had events constantly with others presenting things. We had a tour. You could do self-guided tours where people would sit in like a boat or an airplane or a magical carpet, and they could travel from place to place. Each place would represent, as we did once, a certain book within a genre of children's literature with information on it, and then it would move on to the next place, like fairy tales would be another one. We had a castle that we set up that was essentially a library with sections on children's or on fairy tales, science fiction, you name it, we had it. We put up a spaceship with the help of another avatar named Brian Corleone way above Rachelville with teleports going up to it. And on this spaceship, we had science fiction and fantasy literature presented. It was a wonderful way to present not issues, library topics to individuals and show them with graphics and moving things, parts, how they could use their own imagination within real life, even to create displays of their own.
It sounds like you have some great memories of those days and the things you were able to build, and I can just hear the excitement in your voice about what that might have been like, and it makes me think about archival because now some of these simulations, when they change, some of them disappear. Do you have any video or pictures that you have that archived some of those simulations that you built early on?
We do have pictures, and we've donated most of those to Abby, Rhonda Truman, and I believe she's working with others, including us, on setting up some sort of archive on Second Life.
Oh, that would be just amazing if we could have a space dedicated to archiving sort of the history of virtual worlds, because what happened early on was important work for libraries to understand how to use virtual environments, for best practices. So it's fun to hear about some of those memories that you have. And do you feel like sometimes it's reality is something that's in our minds, and in the physical world, when you go back to your hometown and you realize that the streets are different. Some of the buildings you were in are gone, and you kind of feel this sense of, oh, remember when, and it's kind of a loss. Do you feel like it's similar when something is lost in a virtual environment?
Yes, that's true. Uh, I belong to a Facebook group on Topeka, which is the city that Diane and I live in. And it's interesting to see the photos that people share. We've only been here 37 years, but there's lots of people in this group that have been here all their lives. And you see these photos. Do you remember this place? And they get like 200 responses. Yes. I mean, people want to remember. They want to touch the past sometimes, and and say, I was there. I remember that. In fact, there was a wonderful thing that happened there, and this is what it was. And then other people chime in. And so it would be good to have an archive like this, not just for researchers down the road, but for those of us who experienced it, because that would stir up those memories in our own minds.
Absolutely. And recently, when Abby came in to talk a bit about the beginnings of CVL and that early history, she mentioned that there's a 15-year anniversary coming up. It's hard to believe 15 years. Perhaps you'll be able to be at that celebration, and some of the people who were here all those years ago will be able to attend, and some of those memories, that you're talking about will come up. Do you have any other just early memories that you want to share?
One thing that popped up in my mind last night was working the reference desk. We've all worked a reference desk at one time, probably, where we've answered questions in real life libraries. And coming from an academic background, I expected questions on Chaucer and Shakespeare and maybe the economy and Vietnam in 1978, but instead got questions like, do you know a good drugstore in town? Where's the McDonald's? Do you have a bathroom? And the same thing was true in Second Life. We didn't get the deep stuff usually. It was primarily, how do I get out of these pants and put on different pants? How can I earn money to buy things? How do I use voice? Could you show me how to do that? It was primarily, much like a public library in real life, it was real life issues in Second Life. Uh, the, People want to know how to get around, how to get things, how do they interact with each other. And, we picked up on that pretty quickly, and we developed resources and note cards for how to do that. And it was sort of a really cool experience too. Because you're doing it in chat primarily, you're typing and they're typing, and you don't just have English language speakers, you have people from all over the world who came to the reference desk. And so we had to find translators. We had to sort of try to figure out what people were saying with broken English. And normally we managed really well with doing that. Uh, we dealt with typos, and we did our own typos too. So, it was a cool experience in just meeting people from all over the world and trying to help them function in this virtual reality.
That's so interesting that you compare the similarities of being a librarian in a physical space and being a librarian in a virtual space. And I remember reading an article that said one time that, people sometimes use the word library and librarian as though they're a synonym, but they're not, because, a library is a place. A librarian can be embedded anywhere. And so I believe you would agree with the statement that a librarian can work in a physical world and a virtual world and still be a librarian.
That's very true. Jokingly, Diane has mentioned to me a couple of times in the past when we were at the grocery store and I see someone just sort of lost, and I said, "What are you looking for?" And I'm looking for canned tomatoes. And I say, you know, I think those are over on aisle such and such. And I sometimes I would even lead them over to it. And Diane said, you're being a librarian. You know, I mean, you don't stop being a librarian, I guess, when you're even when you're outside the physical boundaries of the library.
Excellent, excellent point. And is there anything else in closing that you'd like to say about, we've been talking a bit about the past of CVL, the history. Anything you would like to say about past, present, or future of virtual world librarianship?
Well, one thing that I really enjoyed doing was teaching. Uh, I had taught a course, or I taught a course at Emporia State University here in Kansas on cataloging. But when I was in Second Life, I got to teach 2 or 3 courses through the University of Illinois on how to create a collection, how to create a book, and put links in it to resources. And that was a lot of fun. I had usually classes of 10 to 15 individuals. They were all mostly brand new to Second Life, so it was also a bit of herding cats at times. But we took them on tours of the library at Rachelville, things like that, and then sat them down, and then we went step by step on how to use resources to your advantage in setting up a collection or serving the needs of individuals within a virtual. So that was another part of it that I really enjoyed.
Thank you so much for sharing these great memories of the history of the Community Virtual Library, Rocky and Cindy. Is there any other thing you can think of that maybe you'd like me to address, talking about virtual world libraries, or any other things you'd like me to that you want to share about your memories?
I think one of the things is meeting the people. There's a lot of people I would have never met, a lot of people who we are friends with, and so very glad to have known. It's a great thing to be a community and a great friendship, and that's what this was all about.
Yeah, I would add that we met people with views and ideas whom we would have never met in real life. I'm positive of that. And our brains were stretched at times in just understanding and gaining an understanding of how other people's lives work beyond just being librarians, but just human beings. It was a wonderful experience that changed us in how we see the world around us, real life. We really appreciated being a part of it.
Wonderful. That is just wonderful. Those are great memories you've shared. And look, I see Puglet is joining us. There's a chair right here at our podcast station, Puglet. Barbara Gaelic in the physical world, a retired academic librarian. And I'm going to stop recording and then I'll start again when we get Puglet situated.